Hey, Scott.
Hey Gail, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing all right. It's like peak pollen out here on the East Coast.
Oh,
And my eyes, my nose is doing good, which is good because going around sneezing right now is not great.
mhm.
But my eyes, man, whoo,
That sucks. I know that feeling.
it's
Hey, Hunter. Hey,
itchy,
Andy.
itchy,
Uh,
itchy.
um, small exciting note for this week. I moved us over to Google Docs for the TSC notes. So
Look at you, all fancy.
I got like switched over to a different user account or something, sort of implicitly on the Etherpad, and the color was different. I was like, all right, this is the forcing function. We're making the change.
I can't be a different color. I'm purple now instead of pink.
So we have one or two things that we probably want a majority present for. So if I think Marie's out today, sick, and then so hopefully we can get at least one more. And otherwise we can punt some stuff to maybe an asynchronous vote. Yeah, we don't have too much today. Scott, I don't know if toward the second half, if you wanted to go through any of we can finally maybe get to the community contribution topics that we've been keeping on the backlog for a while. I don't know if there's any big updates there.
I think there's not. Raphael says he's on, so maybe there's another one of those. Is he on the wrong meeting? Let's see. Saying we're also on, but don't see you. We'll see if he. Grab the meeting link and see if it matches his meeting link. Address.
Hey, Raphael. Hey, Pravin. All right, looks like we got.
Sorry guys, I was
everybody.
on the wrong Zoom.
Hi guys.
Okay, let's see. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and then we can get going. Okay, so the two big things for today that we want to chat about and then take a vote for is the cloud platform Golang resolution, and then the Access Gateway reference design pattern, with particular interest in the FBC's provisioning of the initial reference design. So go ahead and do this first. So this was something that we chatted about last week. And basically this is the core bit of it, which is core orchestrator services must be written in Go. Everything else should be and needs TSC approval to circumvent that pattern. There's some rationale, etc. Senate exposed it to the community, publicized it with the community, and the feedback was minimal but positive. And then also sent it to the domain proxy project channel, which was the initial sort of motivating rationale for developing this Golang resolution, and seemed like there was no pushback. So at this point, we can chat about it here if anybody has any additional feedback or has heard anything from the community, and then after that we can go ahead and take a vote and yeah, lock it in. All right, sounds good.
One sec.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
It's not my forte, so for me, isn't already the case that most of the parts are already written in Go?
Yeah, so so for context, the orchestrator is already completely written in Go. So this isn't a backwards looking or like refactor based resolution. It's more of a forward looking alignment resolution. They're basically to say like the uniformity and affordances of a single language, Go in particular, in the cloud platform has been very beneficial to the orchestrator and the cloud platform generally. And sort of, and so from there saying, this is something that we want to continue, even as the community begins to contribute more and more to the development process of the cloud platform. And even like submitting design proposals and things like that. And so this just basically makes explicit and aligns with the community with something that has been implicit so far in the development of the cloud platform, which is that Go is the single language, and Go in particular has been like very productive and useful in keeping things simple, despite the amount of Go.
I'm fine with so just for me just a simple question. So I will say so currently most of it's the case. Is there any non-Go part that would be required to be changed, or we will keep this non-Go part as legacy?
Yeah, so no backward-looking changes would be required. The main motivation for this right now is we have community partners looking to build a domain proxy, when some of the cloud platform components of that domain proxy were being discussed. It was being discussed whether it should be written in Python or Go, and there are like some values to each side and to each option. And this resolution is basically saying, like, in this case in particular, as one of a general set, that if you're going to try and write it in Python, you need to write a specific proposal for why and share it with the TSC for there to be a vote.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks for the explanation.
Any other questions or feedback and at this point?
I feel like the way it's worded is open enough to allow negotiation on anything, on any places where people might want to. So I feel like it's just more or less saying, hey, there has to be visibility on this and a rationale.
Yeah.
It seems pretty reasonable.
There's also a section on like the more specifics on what it would look like to add a non-Go service. And not a lot, but just basically, yeah, you have to, here's why and here's what, and going through the TSC. But okay, cool. So do we want to take a vote? Gail, how do you want to do this? Are the Zoom emojis sufficient, or do you want to take a verbal vote? Or
A verbal vote is easy if you just want to do like anyone
Sure.
in agreement, anyone opposed.
Is that something that I should handle?
Yeah,
Generally
sure.
speaking. All right. So in favor of passing this resolution, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So with quorum, passes unanimously.
You didn't give your vote.
Oh, I did. It might have stuttered. Aye. Might have stuttered across the T. All right. So the next is the Access Gateway reference design pattern proposal. I don't know if anyone has read this far. Pretty I can also talk over with the general idea. the idea here is also I'm getting a notification that my internet is unstable, so let me know if I cut out. The idea here is right now we have the Magma project is largely a set of software with some. So for example, the cloud platform is basically just a set of Helm charts, and then we provide, the vanilla or default set of infrastructure underneath it. And then the access gateway is a little bit more where it's like, it's sort of a VM with a set of software put on it. It's sort of like we're trying to transition toward maybe the more cloud native form of it's some Helm charts, and then what you actually provision on it underneath that is restricted but more open. Anyways, that to say, there's less specification in what actually the access gateway would look like from a hardware perspective. For now, currently we say stuff like, Ubuntu, and then here are the as the OS, and then the hardware specs are sort of, here's what we have found experientially to be sufficient, but you need to test it on a case-by-case basis. So that is fine for the process that we've gone through so far, which is more, what would you say, like growth oriented and experimental. And then as we're trying to transition toward a more mature product that companies can try and then spin up very quickly, there's that Shadi's been working on for spinning up a reference hardware design for the access gateway. So you can, for the entire stack that you would need for running an access gateway would be specified by the Magma project. And so the process is detailed here, I think, but basically if I recall, the short form is like TSC can vote on whether we want to include a new particular reference design, and the initial reference design would be the one that FBC has been working on as like a hardware appliance that is inexpensive and scalable and rugged and things like that. So yeah, is there any, do we want to chat about it for a little bit? I'll open up to any input or questions, things like that. To clarify, the main thing that we'd be voting on right now is two things. A, it's, do we want to bring this process into the Magma project of having reference hardware specs and being able to vote in new like blessed specs? And then the second one is, once we initiate that process, do we want to vote in the FBC spec?
Hey, Hunter, Rafael speaking. Okay, so for me, the question is having like some kind of tutorial / reference design documentation. Would be that inserting inside the repository, or in some search of something like wiki pages or something like that, or in the Thesaurus documentation? I'm just asking the question for different reasons. I mean, because if it's in the repo, I mean that definitely you need to maintain the documentation. If it's a bit outside, it's you can tag that to a given release and say that, okay, this is the requirement for a given release, and you don't need to maintain that much.
I think what might make sense here is, rather than taking an explicit vote now to kick it off, we can just have some like initial discussion about whether we think this is a good worth pursuing. I think that I'm like probably in favor, but and then we can invite Shadi to come and give like a short presentation maybe next week, if that's something of interest, and then he'd probably be able to give more detailed responses to the questions.
I'm not talking about the content. I'm talking about the way it's going to be presented. For me, I'm fine having a reference design. I mean, it's documentation is always best, and to especially specifying hardware requirements for a a given use case, for me is great. That's perfect. For me, the way I'm visioning that more is how do you process? Is it inside the repo as in repo documentation, or using like we are using the Thesaurus system that you can, I would say, tag a reference design document to a particular release, and then you don't. It does not have, the document does not have much of a life. Okay.
My assumption is that this would be something we would want to put like on, that is like an ongoing updated thing that's not necessarily tied to a particular release, and we would want to expose like in the repo / like through the Docusaurus.
Yeah, so that's what the first version that you need to maintain and maybe update based on new resources that are required by the source.
Yeah.
Source code.
I think what makes sense here, and to be clear, I haven't like read into this that much except to just skim the documents that Shadi's provided. What makes sense to me is that the general process is something that the Magma project and TSC specifically wrangles, and then for each individual like reference design that is submitted, they can go stale, if that makes sense, right? And so if we end up with a hardware reference design that's submitted and is like appropriate and proof of testing for a particular release, but then the submitter abandons it, or it seems like it's become abandonware, then we can remove it from the set of blessed releases, of blessed reference hardware designs for a subsequent release. And so it would be something, and so maybe I'm unclear, maybe I'm not understanding right, but I feel like maybe it would be some hybrid of the two, where it's like the default is we keep it updated across releases, but for each particular release, you can go to the Docusaurus, view the documentation for that release, and you have like the updated and correct understanding of that reference design for the particular release. And then so if you're in 1.4, you would say, okay, here's the reference design for that works for 1.4, and then we update that across to 1.5 with maybe slightly different specs. And then let's say it's abandoned between the 1.5 and 1.6 releases, then we can remove it from the release, from our documentation in 1.6, and say, okay, here are the alternative reference designs that are still actively maintained.
Okay, for me, that sounds a good process.
Yeah, I don't view this as something that like I said, the individual submitted reference designs, I don't think this is something that the Magma project specifically, like as the open source entity, wants to manage and upkeep. I think this is more of sort of in the model, like in the way that value added resellers, are providing value on top of what the open source project is providing. I view this as like, we will help manage the pointers to these reference designs that that community partners are providing. Okay.
Okay, let's schedule a presentation for next week.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just because I think that it's kind of a two-phase thing, and some additional information could be useful. Aside from me just giving my thoughts on how it would work. And so yeah, let's do that. I'll message Shadi after the meeting, and we can go from there.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm actually here right now.
What's up,
public
Shadi?
meeting. But happy to answer questions now if I can be helpful. But if y'all want to take a week, that's totally fine too. Just want to make sure y'all knew I was here.
So perfect. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have much else. So we can wait, or if you want to just like talk through how much of what I just said did you catch?
I think all of it.
Okay, perfect. Do you want to just take it from here then, and maybe give your more insightful take on it?
Not sure, but I think you captured most of the main points. And Raphael, I think the point that you're bringing up around, actually, I'm not sure if this is your point or Hunter's point, the idea of depreciating reference designs that aren't maintained is not currently captured in the proposal, but I think that makes a lot of sense. And I frankly think it's reasonable to expect that folks who are actively maintaining reference designs should be able to publish updated test results for subsequent versions. But otherwise, I think you captured everything pretty well. The two things maybe I would love specific feedback on are, one, I think reference designs, I think it could make sense for each one to go through a vote of the TSC, but I also wonder if it makes sense to think about like the notion of like co-owners for reference designs, given like the folks who spend a lot of time either thinking about our hardware or the partners in the ecosystem who are hardware focused, or who are developing or performance testing infrastructure, who are going to be able to interpret those results, might be sufficient to kind of check the boxes on the template. And speaking of the template, the fourth slide of the presentation linked has an issue template that I would propose that we like actually adopt something like this, so it is presenting reference design becomes something of a mechanical like acceptance. If you've checked all the boxes, you've provided the information, then it's up to the folks in the community to decide whether or not they want to use your thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I guess the question here to follow up on that is like, did you have in mind for this that there would be a small number of like blessed by the community reference designs, or did you have in mind more of like anyone can submit, and then we have like Nick, you said code owners who are saying, okay, this looks reasonable, let's include it, but not actually like doing any form of manual verification, but just like, does it seem reasonable? Do we trust the people that are submitting this? And so then we would potentially end up with a larger set, because I think either could make sense. What I had in mind is like smaller number, and then the TSC voting is more like a function of proxying the input from the code owners or whoever was positioned for this. But so yeah, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm kind of ambivalent. I think if we have I would be surprised if we're in a world where we have a large number of designs. It'd be almost like a good problem to have in some sense.
Yeah.
But my bigger concern is taking up y'all's time more than anything. But I don't actually have a strong perspective on that either way.
Okay.
I do think that either way, it probably needs a shepherd, quote unquote, or some internal Magma representative who's kind of aware of the reference design proposers, org, and looking at their proposals and kind of assessing them. And I think that TSC may not be the most qualified for that.
I think that makes sense. So I think, Shadi, do you want to work on like identifying either one or a small set of people that would act as that code owner / shepherd role?
Yeah, I can take that on. I mean, just to give you my initial thoughts, I feel like these are probably the folks who are doing someone from the gateway side who's just familiar with kind of gateway performance profiling. So like, I'm going to throw out names as archetypes. So someone like Tariq, perhaps, who's just been spending a lot of time drilling into that and can interpret performance results in the access gateway. Folks like Sudi or Ankur who are like doing performance profiling of access gateways every day. I think it'd be interesting and useful to have someone who has a good grasp of the ecosystem / kind of product view of how Magma is being used, just to kind of understand and validate that we're getting proposals from,
maybe also some people
What?
from Freedom 5 that are deploying stuff also.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I also think it makes sense to have it be like a group of shepherds / code owners, and cross team to represent the ecosystem, or like the open source community as a whole. So yeah, I think I think everything else, the one other thing I wanted to get your thoughts on is, can you talk briefly about, either very abstractly or whatever you had in mind, about the FBC contribution to this to this idea, this pattern?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, just for clarity, I think at this stage, I'm not proposing that we should make any decisions on the FBC design, simply because
Gotcha.
if the FBC design, we're going to go through this process, we couldn't fill out the full issue template yet, because we haven't done the performance profiling, we don't have the ordering information, all that stuff. But yeah, the hope is to kind of get a process in place that once the FBC gateway design is ready, we can run the design through with commercial partners who are actually going to be making this available in the market.
I see. So that makes this an easier motion for now, for sure. Just because, yeah, I wasn't clear what phase that effort was in. So
yeah,
makes sense to get this in place early.
So hard work's almost done, but hard work can be almost done for a long time.
yeah. So I think what my thought on this is, let's take one more week and add two things. One, any a lightly fleshed out process for deprecation, and that will probably be related to the other main thing, which is a more formal description of who is going to be the shepherds, or like the committee or code owners, whatever we want to call it, and we could even use the code owners file potentially for this, for like, where do we want to place these, and I think that would be a nice way to keep things uniform, but make like an approvers team, as we've been doing. Yeah, so how do we want to do that, and who do we want to nominate to be on that team?
Okay.
I think those two additions would then make this like something that feels like a very clear process end to end.
Okay, cool, sounds good. And just for clarity, do you want me to like come up with specific names of folks, or just like kind of the roles that we should be within that shepherd group?
I think both. I think this is
sure.
something that also, like, it doesn't have to be just you coming up with it, but if you just want to handle driving it, I think
totally.
But yeah, cool. Yeah, I think an initial set of nominees would be a good outcome. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks all for the thoughtful feedback.
Okay, cool. So then we will revisit this next week. And so the last thing, we have about a minute and a half left. So Scott, is there anything here that we want to talk about briefly? Do we want to keep pulling this forward? This action item, what are your thoughts here?
The
community contribution topics.
The whole set.
I can also go through and through this in the Scratch workspace after the meeting today, and then for next time I can have a at least from my mind, like a cleaned up set, whether that's an empty set or like more a subset.
So sorry, on this this community contribution stuff here, this seems to have kind of self-resolved a bit. I feel like in the last couple of weeks, I've gotten less pressure on PRs at least.
Yeah.
Personally.
Okay.
Maybe I was squeaky wheel enough, but.
Okay, well then I can message you offline, and we can collaboratively pare down the set from this and the Scratch workspace, and we can probably kill the Scratch workspace as well. And then if there's anything remaining, we can bring it up next week.
Sure.
Cool. All right. That's about it. Before we head out, was there anything else that anyone wanted to bring up? There's not a lot of time, but we can bring it up to chat about asynchronously, or bring it up I can add to the agenda for next week. Okay.
At some point, I need to do a postmortem on the tech debt week. I haven't done that yet, but I think there's definitely some lessons learned to document. So, so I owe that, but I don't have it.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Let's lock it in there, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, have a good week, guys.
Bye.